Your domestic radio goes from 88 to 108, and this goes from 0 to 1,000. And at the top of the scale are things like Earth to space transmissions, that's astronauts talking to each other about what they had for breakfast, what they're going to do when they get home, that sort of thing. And at the bottom of the scale are hearing aids, baby alarms and microwaves. And a friend actually had one of these. He was a hunt saboteur, and hunt sabs and lots of people use these sort of things to listen to the police. And they used to listen to the police in case the police knew where they were. So he'd listen to it and suddenly run away as soon as they heard the police frequencies saying, "We know where the hunt sabs are." But then they needed some money, so I bought it off them, and that was the start of my career. I mean, you have to realise that mobile phones are used by drug dealers a lot of the time. So you hear a lot of, especially living in London, you hear some very interesting kind of code where people say, "I just got a new delivery of trainers. Do you want a box of trainers, John?" And they're quite obviously not talking about trainers that you wear on your feet, and this is like, you know, whatever they're dealing with. So that kind of stuff is quite scary. When people sell guns, that's very rare, but I've heard people actually selling guns over the phone, and that really unsettles me and disturbs me too much, really. And that kind of thing you think you just want to tune out of. It's not the sort of thing it makes you feel good to listen to. I'm more interested in kind of banal, ordinary talk, that conversations that you and I may have had, or you have with your friends, that are so simple and yet at the same time a certain nostalgia, a certain memory that you sort of can relive. Each of us are voyeurs. We all want to watch other people, but we don't want to be that person being watched. We all want to listen, but nor do you want to be that person being listened to. I think the media is quite obviously obsessed with that, the way newspapers and television look at other people's lives, famous people and not so famous people, all the time. We, whether we want to admit it or not, are all voyeurs. You're not supposed to do this kind of thing, much the same as you're not supposed to record films off television and keep them on video, much you're not supposed to use a mobile phone when driving, for example. And it's a very passive form of hacking, in a sense. Hacking is where you break into a computer system and so on, you find all these details out. This merely uses the radio waves. I'm not doing anything kind of active and actually breaking into anything. I don't know what the phone numbers are, it's just merely a radio signal. The law says you're not supposed to listen to these things or do anything with it, which is why I carefully pitch change all the voices, highly edit it, and you hear these tiny snippets, so the chance of anybody recognises themselves as much as like Elvis Presley suddenly appearing now. I did a remix for a band years ago, and they gave me a DAT of all the parts, you know, with like the drums on and the bass, and I couldn't use any of it because it all seemed a bit sort of bland almost. But there was one bit during the saxophone solo and the man went, "Ah!" ready to play the saxophone, so I just sampled him breathing and used that as the rhythm loop for the track. So what I'm really interested in are the parts that in some way are not so valid. It's the kind of debris, you know, the kind of rubbish that you don't need, but you can do something creative with it. We should do the track now then.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
I've always talked about these ideas of sound Polaroids, and that the sound in some sense,
it's like a snapshot.
Yeah, it's like a snapshot. So what you're hearing now, even though it's recorded on tape, is a kind of live snapshot of the area of Dublin at this exact moment in time at 15:03 on a Saturday afternoon in September. And when it comes out on a record, it's obviously like it's like a memory. It's like looking at an old photo or reading an old story or an old poem or a diary entry or something. Nowadays, what you realise is we see everything through a screen. When you write letters to people, you see a screen because you're writing on a computer most of the time. When you check email, you see a screen. When you go to the cinema, you see a screen. We accept all our news and information and entertainment through a screen as well. And I don't want to be producing music, a very kind of visceral, physical, emotional vehicle for, you know, my work and other people's work. I don't want to see that on a screen necessarily all the time. I like the kind of physical movement of like moving with desks and playing real instruments, believe it or not, sometimes. So I really did play a keyboard, and even though it's recorded into a computer, it's like I did actually play it, believe it or not.